This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's ChangeMaker is Aaron Darden. With nearly a decade of leadership experience at the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency in Nashville, Darden now serves as the president and CEO of the Tulsa Housing Authority. Under his direction, Tulsa has secured $80 million in Choice Neighborhoods implementation grants and is undergoing a portfolio conversion of its public housing properties. Since Darden's arrival, Tulsa has leveraged over $350 million towards affordable housing development. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Katie. Thanks for having me.
I am glad you're here. It's so great to be able to shine a light on what Tulsa is doing. You guys have really revolutionized what's going on there. But before we get going, you've been in the industry for a while. Do you mind taking us back to how you first got started in this field and what drew you to working in affordable housing?
This was a very personal thing for me. Both my grandparents and then my mom and her 8 siblings all grew up in public housing in Nashville, Tennessee. They were living out and working, a farm and, had plumbing that was not inside and using outhouses and all of that. And so in the late 50s, they had an opportunity to move into the big city there in Nashville and move into the largest public housing site in the state of Tennessee. And it was the first time they had indoor plumbing. It was a 4-bedroom apartment, and they were absolutely ecstatic and felt so blessed that they were getting that chance to live in a place that they felt was so great, which I always find somewhat ironic considering some of the stigmas around public housing now. Back then, it was an absolute win and almost like winning the lottery if you had the opportunity to move into one of the public housing sites. And so they all grew up there and were able to move on from there as they got older. And while Mom, as she was raising me, we bounced back and forth between Section 8 housing and sometimes subsidized housing. But as they got better jobs and were able to do a little bit better, they would move off the programs and we would move into somewhat market rate housing. And then if the need ever arose, they would go back if the job situations changed, and we would go back onto the programs. And so, which I really think is a testament to what, subsidized housing and public housing really is kind of that crutch when you need it. And then when you're ready and you're standing back on your feet again, then you kind of move away. And then if you ever need to come back, you can. But as I was looking to do and figure out what my path was going to be professionally, my mom was actually working as a property manager for a tax credit property at the time. And she said, "Hey, you're just graduating college. Why don't you consider looking at becoming a manager with the company that I'm working for? At least you figure out what you're going to do." And so that's what I did. So I started out as an assistant manager working for a third party company. And as I started to become more familiar with housing, I just fell in love with the industry. And so I worked in the private sector for a while and then decided I really wanted to challenge myself and move into the public sector. And so that's where, I applied and got a job with the Public Housing Authority there in Nashville. And something I thought that was really cool, the property that I ended up being assigned to once I got hired on was the property that my mom, siblings, grandparents grew up in. And so it was really this surreal kind of full circle moment. My first day there, as I'm now the manager of this site that, again, parents and everybody grew up. And I still had cousins that were living there. And so they were coming and visiting me there in the office. And I really made it a point to check and see the apartment that my mom grew up in. And just so happened to be vacant at the time. And so my first day, towards the end of the day, I made my way around to that unit and kind of stood inside there, kind of took it in and just realizing this is where my mom and all my aunts and uncles, everybody kind of grew up. And so telling my mom that story a little bit later in the week, I could see it in her face that she just had that pride about her that, we all, I guess, want as parents, which is providing just a little bit better path and a little bit better life and opportunity for your children. And that for her was one of those moments where she realized, yeah, I grew up there in public housing, but then was able to provide a life for one of my sons that allowed for him to now come back and be the actual property manager there on site. And so that really sprung me into, I guess, public housing and subsidized housing and all of that, and was a property manager for a very long time there in Nashville, managing, large sites there, and just really developed that love and passion for affordable housing.
Your testimony is really a good example of affordable housing being a stabilizer, and what better way to see that play out in your life, and then now what you're doing in your daily role. Thank you for trusting us with that message and sharing how important affordable housing was for you, and then now the platform that you're in. What a great fit for you career-wise, isn't it?
Initially didn't think so. Coming out, I was, social work major, and I was just dead set. I was going to work, at a hospital or, some type of therapist or something like that. And getting into the business and realizing that there is actually a part of what we do that is heavily focused on some of the issues that, a caseworker or social worker or someone would deal with, but then also integrating that into one of the most intimate things that, I feel you can have an impact on with someone, and that's where they live and their safe place that they go home to every single day, and providing that stability. As we know, without housing and a place to come home to, everything else kind of unravels in someone's life. And so that really is the glue that, in my opinion, that everyone needs in order to have the best opportunities and best chance to be successful in life. And so, I quickly found that there was a lot of crossing there of sectors between social work and housing, and then, being able to find that fit and that being public housing and subsidized housing for me, I think was something that was just unexpected when I first started in the industry.
So conceptually, how do you think your background and then your degree has helped balance with the mission of the Housing Authority?
I think it just gives that perspective. Growing up the way I did, and then having that educational background in social work, you really start to see, what people are needing in order for them to have the best chance to be successful. And so really just taking those principles and that education and really applied it to the strategic planning that I've been able to do both in Nashville and now here in Tulsa, and really hone in on that and focus and make sure that we are providing, wraparound services if that's needed for folks that are there, or if it's, coming in, domestic violence training and all of that before someone actually even becomes housed, to make sure that they understanding, what's appropriate, what's not in terms of relationships, and what's safe and what resources are there. And so I think it's allowed for that perspective to realize that, housing is a piece, but we really need to look, at the totality of a person and their situation to make sure that we are providing everything that we possibly can to make sure that they're going to be successful and hopefully move up and kind of move out and graduate from needing assistance, which is always the goal for us.
Well, no one's going to tell you with any authority that you don't get it, are you? Because you definitely get it, understanding the conditions and the human side of this. So what a very good advantage for you in your current role.
It's been very useful so far. And, I keep coming back to it. Just keeps me with the perspective I think that is needed, because sometimes, especially now, in my position, you can get caught up in what are the returns, here, and, should we be looking at investments for this? And, and really just through that singular lens of just the business. And so I try to go back to that and make sure that we don't lose sight, which is this people-driven industry that we're in. And without those folks and without the need that's there, we wouldn't be doing what we do. And so I just try not to lose sight, and I try to make sure that message is always passed on to all of my staff and everyone that works here, is that let's not lose sight of that. The reason we're here is for these people that are coming through the door every single day. We need to make sure that we appreciate that fact and that we're taking that to heart and making sure that we're providing the best customer service, the best housing that we could possibly do for those folks.
And it is hard in a heavy regulatory environment, lots of development you guys have going on, lots of market conditions. Let's talk about a few of those. I've been in Tulsa a couple of times. In fact, I used to live in Tulsa at one point in my youth during our transient housing instability. We ended up in Tulsa for a while, but you guys are going through as a city quite the renaissance. I can imagine the current conditions and the market is really causing some issues for access to affordable housing. Talk us through the conditions and some of the hurdles that you guys as a city and as a housing authority are currently facing. Give us some of the landscape there of what's happening.
A lot of what I'm going to say is not unique to Tulsa. This is, going to be the same issues that are going to be, the challenges across the country. But when I got here in 2017, conditions were different. Now, the housing authority itself was not in a place that was going to allow for us to immediately start, developing and doing these things. There was not even a development department here when I arrived. And so did a lot of building of capacity and staff over the first couple of years that I was here that really allowed for us to take advantage of RAD and then springboard into the development activities, which was really initiated by our first Choice Neighborhoods win back in 2018. And so we were really going like gangbusters, as you just mentioned, and doing just a ton of development. We've pushed out almost $400 million worth of development since 2018, both the new construction and rehab. But what we've run into, especially this year, is the economic environment has changed. You've got extremely high interest rates. You've got credit pricing in terms of the low-income housing tax credit program that are extremely low now. And you couple those two things together, and affordable deals are extremely difficult to make pencil and get done at this juncture. The reality is there's still a great need. There's housing studies and things that have been done here in Tulsa that show the need for thousands and thousands of units over the next decade. There's just not a whole lot of resources right now that are available that make deals attainable. And so we are hoping that we can start to see some relief both in interest rates, and that credit pricing then will start to go back up to what we seen just a couple of years ago that would allow for that. And then what we're also looking is just for partnerships both at the city level and investments and funding there, which the city of Tulsa just passed a measure in this last bond package where housing now is a part of that. And it's going to be a $75 million investment coming from the city of Tulsa, which is greatly needed. And, the voters here in the residents voted yes to that. And so we're extremely excited for that to be turned on and be able to use that. And then we're also doing a lot of work at the state level and working with our legislators. And that work is going well. We've been able to work with the state legislators and have now a housing stability fund at the state level of $215 million, which is the single largest investment in anything outside of education in Oklahoma's history. And so we were really excited to get that in place, and that now is available. And so we are hoping too that it's going to help ease some of the economic challenges for deals and allow for production of affordable housing to really ramp up here over the next few years. So again, none of that is unique to us, but it's still very challenging. Another thing that I think that is a real threat, at least for us here in Oklahoma, and I know this is probably going to be the case for some other states that are maybe on the coast, but property insurance right now is at an all-time high, and it's actually so expensive. We are really struggling here in Oklahoma to even be able to provide that for existing properties and then for our new construction deals. It is so bad that we almost didn't close 3 deals right before the end of the year because we just could not obtain the general liability that was needed for the investors. And it wasn't that we weren't able to go and pay for it. It's just we were literally not being offered from any carrier across the country that particular insurance that we were needing. Couple that with the fact that HAI, which is the insurance that most housing authorities use, they notified us that they would no longer be providing wind and hail coverage for us here in Oklahoma, which, as you can imagine, is problematic in Oklahoma, wind and hail. And so that's really caused us to try to pivot and find that coverage elsewhere, which we've done, but it is so expensive and the deductibles are of such that it effectively doesn't provide us coverage because we couldn't afford to pay the deductible if something was to happen. So I think we are moving into a space where that is going to become a crisis in our industry because it is insurance alone and those premiums are crippling the OPEX and single-handedly causing deals not to work. And so we have been working, with our state legislators and trying to figure out if there were some options at the state level, but right now there's just no good answers. And so we are really just trying to beat that drum that something is going to have to change around property insurance, or we're going to find ourselves in a place, at least here in Oklahoma, in Texas and Florida and California and some of these other places where you just can't get the coverage that you're needing, both for existing and new. And so I wish there was something else in terms of a silver bullet, but right now we're kind of at a loss in trying to figure that out.
When you talk about removing obstacles to increasing supply, this is a major one. And lots of industry groups have done studies. They're gathering all of the empirical data that's talking about this rising property insurance cost, but there's not a lot of solutions right now. A few states have done some kind of state insurance fund. A couple of the hurricane states have. But right now, the solution making is really not coming forward quite yet. So this is a major obstacle and one that is going to be a hard hurdle to cross when we build more units. I mean, it's not something that a lot of people are able to cross right now.
Right. We've got a second choice neighborhoods project that we're working on in North Tulsa. The first phase is now ready to be financially closed, and we probably would have done that by now, but we are trying to figure out insurance still. We've got the quote that we're going to go with, but now we're having to go back and revisit the OPEX on the deal, and now we're going to end up having to start cutting things that are going to impact residents just for insurance premiums. And it's so frustrating, that we're having to do these things. But with choice neighborhoods, as you know, we don't have a choice. We have to keep moving because this has an expiration date on it. So it's challenging. We are talking with other states as well, and we're just trying to figure out how to make it until something starts to shift and change, which we've been told may happen in 25, maybe 26, but in the meantime, I think we're looking at some very challenging times and trying to figure that out.
And I want to continue exploring the Choice Neighborhoods implementation grants in greater depth, but we'll have to dig into that in part 2. Also, next time on ChangeMakers, Aaron Darden, the president and CEO of the Tulsa Housing Authority, will share insights into the diverse team of professionals he has assembled at Tulsa, drawing talent from across the nation. And he'll discuss the impact this team is having on the organization's initiatives and objectives.
That's allowed for us to be able to be so successful and push out as many units and things that we've done in a very short period of time is because we just brought that expertise from big cities and brought them here, and everybody was willing to just buy in and do the work.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.